Okay.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Chris Sherritt. This is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. Robert Harding and Justin Britzler are with me. Wow, it's March. Go figure. Where is this year flying by? And of course, we're not talking college basketball. We're not talking the NBA or the NHL or Major League Baseball. We're talking a sport that their season ended last month, the NFL, of course. But the NFL is we've said this many times, Robert, that it's the sport that really has no offseason. You can always find a relevant issue to discuss about the NFL literally 52 weeks a year. 52 weeks a year. Hello, Justin. So, all right, we're going to start with Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. He hasn't demanded a trade, but his agent listed a bunch of teams that he wouldn't mind being traded to, including the Chicago Bears, which I'm sure Justin would be thrilled to have Russell Wilson in the division. But the thing is, there's been reports that he's been upset with the coaching staff. Him and Pete Carroll aren't getting along. Will he be Seattle's quarterback in September? I say no. I think he will be dealt sometime. I mean, look, free agency hasn't started yet. We've got, a little under 2 months to the draft. I think this will pick up. I think the Seahawks are going to do something. I think that they know that, they need a quarterback who is not at odds with their coaching staff. And I think they trade Russell Wilson to somebody. And I think they get some draft picks. And they picked Russell Wilson, I believe, in the 3rd or 4th round back in 2012. They have a history of picking good quarterbacks in later rounds. So what's to say that they don't trade Russell Wilson? You get some of that draft capital, maybe try to move up or pick someone later on. I think Russell Wilson is never going to play another down for the Seahawks. I could be wrong, obviously, but I think he's done. I just think there's too much distrust between him and the coaching staff for them to move forward. Justin, your thoughts on Seattle?
Wow. None of us have been able to talk yet except for you, Chris, and yet that's the hottest take you're probably going to hear today, that you don't think Russell Wilson will be a Seattle Seahawk come this September. Very interesting. Listen, obviously all this stems from there's been rumors of his unhappiness before this, but this all stems from an article in The Athletic that published within the last week, really detailing kind of his issues with the Seahawks, with Pete Carroll, with their unwillingness to really hand over the reins of the offense to him. And listen, first off, the Seahawks basically put their offense in Russell Wilson's hands for the first 8 weeks of the 2020 season. And for 5 to 6 weeks, they looked awesome. And then Russell Wilson started turning the ball over 3 times a game. And Pete Carroll was like, this isn't a recipe for us to win. We need to dial back. We need to play more ball control. We need to run the ball because our defense is not capable of winning games when it comes to shootouts. And Russell Wilson didn't like that. And my advice to Russell is, hey, you want to throw the ball 45 times a game? Don't throw 3 interceptions a game, okay? It's pretty simple. Take care of the football. I think it's interesting, the teams that he supposedly wants to go to. So you've got the Saints, the Cowboys, the Las Vegas Raiders, and as Chris mentioned, the Chicago Bears. Did I mention any of those teams twice? I think I don't know. I lost track. But yeah. I don't think any of those situations, aside from maybe New Orleans, is necessarily a step up. The Seahawks, as I said a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this quarterback drama, the Seahawks are one of the most successful franchises of the past decade. They've continuously built good teams. They've built good teams without needing their quarterback to be great, which is a nice luxury to have. Russell, thank you for your one Super Bowl title that you won because of that defense and running game. I think there's a part of Russell Wilson that he's not necessarily unhappy with the way the team is built. He's unhappy that he's not the star of the show, that he is not necessarily viewed among the upper echelon of quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, he's never had an MVP vote, Chris Collinsworth is never shy about mentioning that when the Seahawks are on NBC. And he wants to be mentioned in that class. And he wants to be considered one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. And he thinks that the Seahawks are robbing him of that opportunity. Just some advice to Russell. I think New Orleans would be a good situation for him. But really, you think John Gruden is going to be the guy that's going to lead you to an MVP caliber season? You think Mike McCarthy, who couldn't make it work with now 3-time MVP Aaron Rodgers and couldn't build a supporting offense around that guy, you think he's going to help you, Russell Wilson? And don't even get me started on the Chicago Bears, that miserable franchise. Listen, I hope he comes to Chicago because just like the Bears, Russell Wilson has shown absolutely no ability to go into Lambeau Field and win football games. I say bring him on. Maybe it'll be a challenge, unlike it has been for the last 25 years with the Bears. But listen, it's interesting. I don't know if I'd go as far to say that he's definitely going to be gone, but I do think that there's enough smoke to warrant further conversation and further speculation. But if I was a betting man, I'd say he's going to stay in Seattle, at least for this upcoming season, and then we'll see.
Robert.
Yeah, this situation, it's a quintessential Russell Wilson. I think the way he's approaching this, because, the way that it's been presented, it's not really him, demanding a trade, but he kind of wants one. He's upset with the team. He's trying to have it both ways, which sounds like a Russell Wilson thing to do. He doesn't seem to mind. He, on one hand, he is willing to play for Seattle, but on the other, if they don't improve and they want to trade him, he's all for it. Okay. I agree with Brits. These choices and teams really don't make a lot of sense. He has a pretty good offense in Seattle right now. DK Metcalf is one of the best young receivers in the league. Tyler Lockett is one of the underrated receivers in this league. They do have a decent running back core there. Chris Carson, when he's healthy, can certainly carry the load. Russ's problem is that he gets sacked a lot. And I'll give him that the offensive line has been a long-standing problem, but it's not as if the Seahawks haven't tried to fix it. It's just that these guys don't work out. So, this thought that he isn't getting the line or that he wants, and, he wants more control or whatever, okay, but what kind of control do you think you're going to have in New Orleans with Sean Payton? What kind of control do you think you're going to have in Chicago with Matt Nagy, who thinks that he's an offensive genius? How about Gruden? Gruden's not going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, Russell, we'll do whatever you want to say. No, I don't see it happening that way. So I think he's, biting off a little more than he can chew here with this demand. I think his best fit is in Seattle. That team looks pretty good. The defense actually came on in the latter half of the season. I'm not saying it's a top 5 unit or anything, but they certainly played better than they did in the first half of the year. And, really the problem down the stretch was Russell Wilson, that he just did not play as good as he did in the first 5 or 6 weeks, as Justin mentioned. So, Chris, I give you credit for going out on a limb. You're usually, this kind of wishy-washy type. You don't like to take risks. So I give you credit for your hot take. But, I think that there's a lot of smoke here. I think Russell's, trying to make a play, trying to flex a little bit to see if the Seahawks will give him what he wants. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll spend some money, upgrade the offensive line. I think that's really the big concern. But other than that, I just don't see why Seattle would trade him away unless it's to a team where there's an obvious quarterback, a younger quarterback that they can bring in and also get some draft picks. I just don't see that happening with this arrangement now.
Okay, well, speaking of players leaving, J.J. Watt, formerly of the Houston Texans, announced that he was signing not with Robert's Buffalo Bills, not with Justin's Green Bay Packers. No, surprised everybody and signed with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, I don't think anybody saw that one coming except one guy that put $20 down and won $1,000 for it. Kudos to that person. But it is a surprise. I mean, again, nobody thought he was going to go to Arizona. I mean, look, Arizona is definitely a team that is on the rise, no doubt about it. Kyler Murray, one of the better young quarterbacks in the game. And I get that they've got Chandler Jones on that defensive line, who's a pretty solid pass rusher. So I get it. The Cardinals are not a dog team by any means of the imagination, but still you figure you want to go to a team that's very close to the Super Bowl, like the Bills or the Packers, two teams that both went to their conference championship games last season. So yeah, I'm definitely surprised by this, and it'll be interesting to see how it works out. Go ahead, Robert, your thoughts.
Oh, I have some thoughts about this one.
Oh, you have.
Look,
He's scorned. The Bills fan is scorned.
Oh, come on. Look, Ritz knows because we had a Twitter exchange or a text exchange. I called it a long time ago. I didn't think he was coming to the Bills. And to be honest, I didn't want him on the Bills. Not for this much money for sure. You know, the Bills have a few different areas of need that could be addressed in free agency. You know, there's already talk that Matt Milano could draw $15-16 million, and they aren't willing to pay him that much. So why would they bring in JJ Watt for that same deal, especially when this guy hasn't been the same player in the last 5 or 6 seasons? Yeah, he was a dominant player in his first 5 years in the league, but he's had 2 healthy seasons in the last 5. And you know, that should be a huge red flag before you dump $23 million guaranteed at him. But here's what I'll say about JJ Watt and other players that do this too. You know, for all this talk about, oh, I want to play for a contender. Yeah, for the right price. I said this on Twitter the other day. You know, all these guys can say what they want. They can say all the right things about, oh, I want to win a championship. Well, when's the last time the Arizona Cardinals won a championship? It was when Shearer graduated from high school back in the 40s. Okay. You know, this team is not a Super Bowl contender. They couldn't even make the damn playoffs last year when they expanded to 7 teams. So, you know, this thought that, oh, JJ Watt's going to come in and, you know, now that team's a force. I mean, come on. That division's the toughest division in football. If Russell Wilson does stay with Seattle, they're going to be in the conversation. The Niners are going to be healthy next year. The Rams should get an upgrade with Matt Stafford. That's a tough division. And that's just talking about getting into the playoffs. Then, you know, to get through that conference, that is a hellacious conference with the Packers still there. And obviously the Saints, I think the Saints will still be competitive. You got Tom Brady and the Bucks there. And then if Dak's healthy, you know, I think the Cowboys will be better next year too. So I'm sick of hearing these guys who whine about wanting to play for a better team. You know, I don't care if he doesn't come to the Bills, but, you know, the Browns were obviously in the conversation. I think the Browns, you know, certainly a better team than where the Cardinals are at right now. They were very close to making it to the AFC title game this past season. And Justin's Packers, you know, obviously there was a Wisconsin connection there. The Packers, they've been on the doorstep the last 2 seasons. Those are obvious choices. The Cardinals, it's a bum pick by a guy who's played for some bum teams over the years. He claims that it's about the quarterback, and he picked about the 15th best quarterback in the league. Good for him. He got his payday. That's really what this is about. In a couple years, he'll be ring sniffing again, and we'll hear this whining about wanting to play for a contender. Looking forward to it, JJ. Good luck playing with the Steelers.
Go ahead, Justin.
I don't want to begrudge anyone for going out and getting as much money as possible. But Robert is spot on. Don't insult my intelligence by forming this this brand about yourself that you're only concerned with winning and team success and blah, 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 which I think JJ Watt has done specifically over the last few months as the Texans have turned into a total train wreck. Having post-game press conferences where he calls out teammates, not necessarily by name, but just the team in general about being quitters and not caring about what product they're putting on the field. Okay, then again, don't insult my intelligence by going to a team like Arizona that, let me see, checks notes, has less playoff appearances than the team you just came from. The Cardinals haven't made the playoffs since 2015. And as Robert said, they're not exactly a franchise known for year in and year out success. They have their years here and there. Obviously 2015, they made the NFC Championship. They were fortunate to do so. I'll remind people that they were a Hail Mary away from blowing that game against the Packers in the playoffs. They had, a couple years with Kurt Warner, younger Larry Fitzgerald, where they were good. They made a Super Bowl, but this is not a team that's among the consistent best in the NFC. And I just think this is somewhat of an admission, although he won't admit it, that J.J. Watt cared more about getting paid more than he wanted to play for a Super Bowl. As Robert laid out, there were several teams that were rumored to be in the running for J.J. Watt. The Packers, the Browns, the Bills, all teams that were significantly better than the Cardinals last year. And Kyler Murray is going to have to take a significant step forward in his career that I'm not sure he's capable of to have the Cardinals in a position to be as good as those teams. So when all is said and done, whenever J.J. Watt calls it quits, whether it be a year from now, 2 years, 3 years, whenever, people are going to look back and they're going to say, listen, J.J. Watt was one of the greatest defensive players of his era, of the last 10 years. He won a bunch of Defensive Player of the Year awards. He was a regular All-Pro. But when he had his chance to go really solidify his legacy, which he would have done had he went to Green Bay or Buffalo and maybe won a Super Bowl in one of those spots, instead, he went to Arizona, where he's probably going to play for an also-ran franchise that maybe sneaks into the playoffs, but also maybe finishes fourth in their division and wins 6 games. We don't know. That NFC West is going to be fascinating. I legitimately could see any of those teams finishing first, and I could legitimately see any of those teams finishing fourth. So, hey, congrats to J.J. Watt for getting one last payday, but don't pretend like the most important thing was winning, because it obviously was not.
All right, our last topic. Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, has been critical of the lack of black head coaches in the NFL. Why is this lack of head coaches, and is there a solution? And then just before we came on, there was some story that the Bills are pushing for a rule delay, rule change, where there would be a delay in hiring head coaches and also front hires Super Bowl. I think this would be the idea that would help some minority get jobs, because you look at like Todd Bowles, Leslie Frazier. Some of these offensive and defensive coordinators that got to the Super Bowl by the time that most of the openings were closed by then. So it really hurts qualified minority candidates from getting interviews or from possibly getting hired by teams. Look, I'm a Dolphins fan. The Dolphins, they waited till after the Super Bowl a couple of years ago to hire Brian Flores, minority candidate. Brian Flores, I think, has done a very good job as the Dolphins coach. I feel bad we have to talk about these things in 2021. I want to think that in the NFL, a sport where winning is the most important thing, you'd like to think that owners and general managers, just hire the best person, whether he's black or white. Now, that being said, I think minorities, the NFL has done with the Rooney Rule and needs to do as much as possible to help minority candidates get their names out there to become coordinators and head coaches. The NFL is unfortunately woefully underrepresented by the number of minority coaches that they have in their ranks, and they need more. I think that's a good thing to have better representation of minorities in the NFL as head coaches, as general managers, because there are a lot of qualified coaches out there. If they weren't qualified, that'd be one thing. But we all know that there are very qualified coaches out there and front office people that are African-American that deserve to have a chance to be a head coach, to be a general manager. And the NFL needs to do as much as they possibly can to do that. Now, what can they do? Well, I mean, like I said, we have the Rooney Rule, and the NFL has done other things to give minorities opportunities as assistant coaches. That's great. I think unfortunately, it's going to take more time. And I hate to say that, because to me, we shouldn't be saying that, but unfortunately it has to be said. And, I hope someday that there's a time in the NFL when half the coaches are minorities, or 3/4 of the coaches are minorities, or, whatever. It's just, the NFL needs to do a better job. I shouldn't say the NFL needs to do a better job, but NFL owners need to do a better job of hiring minorities. I mean, not just doing the token Rooney Rule interview, but actually, hiring a minority that can do a good job, because God knows there's enough out there that can do a good job. And again, that's really what we need to see, is opportunities given, and hopefully opportunities that are successful. Justin, go ahead.
Well, I will give the NFL a tiny morsel of credit. There were 2 minority coaches, head coaches hired during this year's cycle. Robert Saleh was hired as head coach of the New York Jets. I think that's a great hire. I think that's the best hire of this year. And if you're a Jets fan, I think that's exciting for your franchise, which has been pretty pathetic for the last 10 years. And then this one was kind of out of the blue, but the Texans hired David Culley, who I got to be honest, I had never heard of until he got that position. I know he was with Baltimore, I believe, in a receiving coach capacity or something like that, maybe an assistant head coach, something like that. And, 2 minority hirings as far as head coaches in the same cycle. It's been a while since that's happened. I mean, Chris mentioned Brian Flores a couple of years ago when there was a ton of openings in 2019, and he was the only minority coach to get the nod that year. Last year, I think there was 5 openings, and Ron Rivera was the only minority to get a head coaching job. So it does seem like inch by inch, the NFL is heading in the right direction, but it goes beyond head coaching positions. It's giving people positions as coordinators and position coaches, and that's really where the NFL can do a better job, is giving Black coaches a greater opportunity in those capacities. I got to be honest, I was a little disappointed when the Packers had a defensive coordinator opening, and they interviewed several candidates, and they end up hiring Joe Barry, who's a white guy who's had multiple chances to be a head coach or be a defensive coordinator in the NFL. And each of the 4 years he was a defensive coordinator, he had one of the worst defenses in football. Maybe he'll be great, I don't know, but why is someone like that being given continuous opportunities in a prominent role, whereas a coach like Eric Bieniemy continuously leads one of the best offenses in football with the Chiefs? He's been around the NFL for at least a decade in various roles. Why is he not getting the opportunity? Why is Urban Meyer getting an NFL coaching gig with, the Jaguars, who I think are one of the more desirable spots open right now because they have the number 1 pick and they're going to have Trevor Lawrence most likely. Why is that guy getting a chance, but not someone like Eric Bieniemy? These are questions that remain unanswered. It's unfortunate. It just shows the NFL has a lot more legwork to do, and not just the NFL, but all levels of football, as I've consistently said, need to do a better job of giving minorities the opportunity to coach, because let's face it, 75% of professional football players are African American. Why so little of them get head coaching positions? It just doesn't really jive. It doesn't make sense. So credit to the NFL for at least, taking a step, offering that incentive to hire minorities with draft picks. But we got a long ways to go.
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, this is something that needs to change. And I know that there have been a lot of different efforts at it. I don't know how you change the institutional aspect of it, because if you look around the league, I can't remember the makeup of every owner, but I'm pretty sure that they're either all or virtually all white men specifically. So that's obviously problematic to start. And you have to break through that. Why does a guy like Adam Gase, who was a failure in Miami, take his crazy-eyed routine to New York and gets gobbled up right away after getting canned for no reason? And look what a disaster that was, not only for the Jets, but for Sam Darnold's development, quite frankly. That's a great, one of the prime examples I can think of just a ridiculous move by a team to jump at hiring a white coach who doesn't really have that much of a track record in this league. I mean, let's face it, the reason that he gets the attention that he does is because Peyton Manning made him look good years ago. And he's he's treated like some sort of offensive whiz when he's not. And he's been able to parlay that into 2 head coaching jobs, which is ridiculous. I think this Bills proposal that's being talked about, that waiting until after the Super Bowl to kind of initiate the hiring process, I think that may help it in a way. Obviously, it's not going to be a full-blown solution, but I think it'll allow guys like Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles was the MVP of the Super Bowl. This is a guy, going into this, everybody was hearing about Patrick Mahomes, anointing him the next big thing. He's unstoppable. The Chiefs' offense is unstoppable. And Todd Bowles made Patrick Mahomes look like Tua, okay? Patrick Mahomes couldn't do anything against that defense. So,
crap. Wow. Gotta take a dig, don't you?
couldn't resist.
So, dig. Yeah, couldn't resist.
But after that Super Bowl, if you had this rule where you couldn't initiate the hiring process until after that, you don't think Todd Bowles is going to be a hot commodity, especially in a league that knows that Mahomes is this huge star, and that if you're gonna have, whether you're in the AFC or NFC, if you want to win a title, you're probably going to have to go through the Chiefs to do it. So yeah, Bowles would probably get some looks. Justin mentioned Eric Bieniemy. I mean, that's just a travesty. I go back to, the Eagles hired Doug Peterson after Peterson made a name for himself for a few years as the Chiefs offensive coordinator. And we saw that turn out. Yeah, he won a Super Bowl. Obviously, the way it ended for him in Philadelphia wasn't great, but he parlayed that offensive coordinator experience into a head coaching job. There's no reason that Bieniemy should be treated differently. Why is he? I think it goes back to the owners. I think it goes back to some of the front office types as well, a mostly white crowd. So, I think that's a starting point. There are a lot of good black assistant coaches on good teams. Byron Leftwich in Tampa Bay is another example. That guy should have a future as a head coach, I think, just given his background, offensive coordinator, obviously down there, but also a former NFL quarterback. That's a guy that could be a future head coaching prospect. So, there's a lot of different coaches around the league that could be considered. And the fact that Bieniemy's been passed over multiple off seasons now is just a head scratcher. I don't, that one's tough to explain. I mean, if you're Houston, they were basically shamed into interviewing him. Like, he wasn't even on their list initially, which is just a joke. That's an example of what a lot of these guys are up against. Some of these owners who, they profit off black athletes, but when it comes time to hiring people, they look the other way. They want to look for the pampered white kid to hire, like what the Packers did with Joe Barry, which was a joke of a hire. So, this is what these guys are up against. And I don't know what the full solution is. I think it does take getting more diversity in the front offices. And then I think it spills out from there. But it's a tough culture to break through when this is how they've operated for basically 100 years, and so I think it's going to be a slow progression. I do think that the incentives are nice that they're offering to teams, but I think at the end of the day, it's about the culture. You need to change the culture with some of these teams, and that's a much harder thing to do.
Yeah, there needs to be more minority coaches in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. So, all right,
Before you
guys.
go, Chris, can I just,
Yeah,
I just want to jump in quick and just add to, I didn't really talk much about this proposal in my overly long rant, but it does just make sense for the NFL to do this for another reason. And Chris, you alluded to this off the top, that the NFL news cycle really does not end even when it's the off season, but it would make sense to kind of expand that the discussion around the NFL to, this little bit of a dead period where we're not quite at free agency yet, but the Super Bowl's over and there aren't games being played. There's not a ton of NFL news going on right now, so why not push back that hiring cycle, that timeline to, the week when normally the Pro Bowl would be going on and after the Super Bowl, and tell teams that's when you can start interviewing and that's when you can start making hires. It just makes sense, because it gives, instead of people talking about coach hirings during the playoffs when we should be focusing on the actual games, now you're pushing it back to a time when we don't really have much to talk about other than what quarterbacks are going to retire and who's going to get released, which isn't really that thrilling of a conversation to have. So it seems like it'd be beneficial to all parties. You're giving opportunities to more coaches who otherwise have been almost victims of their own success, like Todd Bowles. And if you're the NFL, you get people talking about your league when otherwise they might not be talking about it as much, because everyone wants to talk about these new coach hirings. It seems like a win for everybody. So why not get it done? Hopefully,
or change the rule that you have to wait till the team is eliminated before you can hire somebody. Because, like I said, the Dolphins had to wait till the Patriots won the Super Bowl over the Rams before they could hire Brian Flores, even though that's who they wanted, and they had to wait and wait and wait. And to me, some teams don't want to wait that long because, as you know, you have to assemble a staff, which takes time. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done. So some teams aren't willing to wait another 2 or 3 weeks, depending on who they're looking at. And again, that's a legitimate topic to bring up, but still, it does hurt some minority candidates in that situation. So to me, it's like, look, if you're the offensive coordinator of a team that's going to the Super Bowl, you should be able to take a job. You shouldn't have to wait that extra week or 2 or whatever to do that. Maybe you can't start assembling your staff while you're still employed by your current team, but at least you can be officially hired. And, you don't have the press conference till after the Super Bowl, but at least you're officially hired where it might help somebody out. So, all right, guys, you ready to wrap it up? All right, we're going to wrap it up. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us this week. Maybe next week we'll talk something non-NFL, but who knows? But, we enjoy it anyways.
An all NHL show, Chris, your favorite.
Oh, I'd be great with that. Oh, boy, that'd be great.
Chris hit his 6-month quota last week when we talked about outdoor venues. So he's good until, probably November-ish.
Well, I think maybe we might do a little college basketball, maybe a little NBA, maybe some baseball. I mean, we are getting a little closer to the beginning of the Major League Baseball season. That would be kind of cool. So we'll see. You never know what's going to break in the news. That's the other thing too. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about sports is you never know what's going to happen. So, all right, folks, we appreciate you joining us. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.